Who is Franklin the Turtle? On the surface, he's a kid's show character that spans generations from the old movies to Franklin and Friends. But if you look a little deeper, it's a horror, one of tragedy, about a community with a sick tradition that went too far, and Franklin's brother paid the price. If you thought my Jake the Neverland Pirates theory was crazy, then oh boy, are you gonna like this one. Let me explain. Franklin has many friends is the name of one of his shows, but one question when looking at his friends and their families, and really anyone in Franklin media, is their name, because some have real names like Franklin, and others just their animal. Franklin's best friend is named Bear, and he has friends like Beaver, Snail, Fox, and all sorts of animal names. Another weird element of Franklin is the animals themselves in the world. Franklin works like many other kids shows like Arthur or Bluey, but the problem is that it also shows not evolved pets and even wild animals. There is a whole episode called Franklin Wants a Pet where he gets a goldfish. And well, I think the best way to understand all this is to look at Woodland, the town Franklin lives in. It's located not in some fantasy wonderland, but in eastern North America, which places this universe on Earth. Now, I was wondering while doing my research on if humans ever existed in Franklin. And well, other than some stage play that is definitely not canon, no, they haven't. They're all movies and shows and books. Not once have humans been mentioned or seen, and based on the societies we observe in both Woodland and outside of it, I don't think they ever did. Mainly because this is a world that has evolved in technology, but the landscape has not changed. So I think it's way more likely that for some reason animals have evolved to talk through a universal language and built some form of society, and somehow got computers and lawnmowers. Now, how they did this all is a problem for future me, but it does give me a lot of insight on their society. One I think exists in a hierarchy, and the best way to understand that is to simply look at the other species and their limits. Franklin's friend Snail seems to have a very sad life, and while Franklin feels bad for him and tries to help, it doesn't stop that Snail's life is hindered heavily by his speed. He even goes on to say in an episode where he can't make it to a party without Franklin that all his friends don't notice him because of his speed. This type of situation can be observed through multiple species, and really it's just a fact that this world is built for a certain type of animal. Not one animal like a turtle, but one general build, speed, and size. Now this does lead me to ask one thing. Does this in any way affect the unevolved similar animals like pets or wildlife? And if so, how? Franklin and his pet. This is the core of the video's confusion. Why does Franklin get to live in a nice, rod, but his pet gets a fishbowl? I had many theories on the difference in evolution here, like maybe it just having to do with the species. In this universe, fish just aren't evolved, which is why they can eat them, but turtles and bears are. But that isn't true. While we don't see fish characters, that is because fish don't breathe on land. We do in fact see fox and bird characters, even though we also see fox and birds as unevolved animals. So in return, it isn't defined by species. No, it is definitely defined by something far more complicated. See, if you break it down, it seems to the core of what makes something evolved is how human it is. If they walk on two legs, can talk, etc. And when comparing, say, a normal turtle and Franklin, one is way larger, has toes and fingers, and can literally talk. So when trying to figure out the difference, the biggest way is size. If an animal is way larger than our world, they're evolved. That's why Franklin's goldfish is a normal size and looking fish, or the cats and dogs that appear in the show and movies. Now, with this said, what does this whole hierarchy do to the culture of Woodland? Well, we can observe it in animals like Snail, who due to species limits is fundamentally lower in the society structure. Now, what the exact structure of this hierarchy is a little more complicated, but I do think I would say the people in power are usually the faster, stronger, larger animals are just predators. But with this all said, do we actually have any way of solving the reason behind these evolved animals? Well, maybe. See, this is a magical universe with supernatural forces and actual magic everywhere. There are similar examples like the Tooth Fairy or Santa Claus, but also weirder ones like stories of haunted lakes that, to be honest, based on the episode, have to be haunted, or objects that give luck or heal the sick. Overall, Franklin Media proposes a world of magic, and in return, I think that's maybe why they evolved. I don't have direct proof of this, but I just think it makes sense to me. There's no real way we're gonna know exactly what happened to them like this, but the idea of magic and being around it messing with evolution kinda works. But that's not all there is to this theory, because like I said before, in the start of this video, the name system still doesn't make sense. Before I get into the big twist, if you like this video so far, please subscribe for more theories on things you forgot existed. Either way, back to the video. Franklin has a name. It's Franklin. But his friends, or at least a good amount of them, don't. Now, what is the actual connecting theme between all of these people? The reason they have or don't have names? Well, it's actually very weird. Every older sibling or person with no siblings has no name. They go by their species, bear, snail, and so on. But every younger sibling has a name. Now this has one little plot hole, being that Franklin in fact does not have an older sibling. At least I don't think so. So what's going on? Well, a conspiracy. Because I believe Franklin has a secret brother. Now you may be asking, well then where is Franklin's older sibling? Because if Franklin really does have an older brother or sister, you'd think there would be something acknowledging them. Even if they have passed away when they're really young, you'd expect a picture somewhere in the house, some form of memorial, literally anything. But no, there is absolutely no acknowledgement of this secret older sibling, almost like they've been hidden away, or they just don't exist. And well, I think there may actually be a reason for that. We already know there seems to be some history of developmental differences in Franklin's family. In some of the earlier books, Miss Turtle is actually shown walking on all fours, which could point at issues in their family. Or another more easy to understand canon piece of evidence is that Franklin himself is repeatedly described as being slow for a turtle throughout the entire series, sometimes even by his own family. So what if Franklin's older sibling was born even less developed than Franklin? What if he was born as a normal turtle? Okay, before you leave, I get it. I kinda just made a wild theory without any proof of an older sibling, other than just why they could exist. But I think there is one piece of evidence that is so surprising, but so foolproof, that will make you believe this theory instantly. In a game from the early 2000s, there is an image of Franklin right next to a much smaller, seemingly much less developed turtle. This turtle is notably smaller than Franklin and is very different to any other. Now you may be saying, that's his sister, but they look very different. This turtle is small and lacks humanoid fingers and toes and has an entirely different color shell to Franklin or his sister. There's just something different about them. And well, I think what Franklin says while we see his flashback picture reveals everything. He says, sometimes I just have to think. And he says it in an incredibly sad voice because he is carrying the guilt of what happened to his brother. But if this really is Franklin's older brother, what could have happened to him? Well, I think his parents may have waited to see if he would eventually develop normally. Because if they have some delayed gene or a lack of certain genes, or whatever the magic that alters them, maybe they were just hoping the kid would grow out of it. But when he doesn't, they began to spiral. With our context of this world's life as an unevolved animal, it's not pretty, whether being sold to a pet shop or let out in the wild to live in the elements, or if you really think about it, get served for food, these guys aren't treated well. And if that's all the case for Franklin's brother, I think his parents would have tried to save him from at least the worst fates. So they hide him away in the forest of Woodland without his family, but also without the dangers of civilized society. And that guilt of his brother still being alive and knowing nothing about him or what happened to him is eating at Franklin and his parents. That's why they're so overprotective of their kids, why neither of them work except for the rare times Franklin's mom volunteers at the school, because the fear of something happening to them, of whatever makes Franklin slow, getting worse, or him falling behind because of it, is eating at them, because the reality of losing another is just too much. If you like this video, watch this one right here, or this playlist of my best. Either way, bye.